A black young woman who looked homeless walked into the Grand Meridian just before midnight, rain dripping from her torn coat, her muddy sneakers squeaking softly against the marble floor. Beside her was a wounded German shepherd, limping badly, one paw still bleeding. She asked for the cheapest room the hotel had left. The front desk clerk looked her over once, from the wet braids beneath her hood to the trembling dog beside her. Then he leaned forward and said, just loud enough for the people in the lobby to hear, "Miss, our hotel is fully booked tonight." 3 minutes later, that same clerk handed 2 key cards to a wealthy white couple, even though they had not made a reservation. When the girl asked to speak with the manager, she was humiliated in front of the guests, accused of disturbing the lobby, and escorted toward the revolving doors, while her injured dog was still bleeding beside her. But no one in that golden hotel lobby knew that the girl who looked homeless, the girl they were pushing back into the rain, was Naomi Whitaker, the daughter of the woman who owned every inch, every wall, and every room in that hotel. And before the night was over, the dog would recognize a man stepping out of the elevator. The truth would freeze the entire lobby, and someone would lose their job on the spot. If you have ever been judged before you even had the chance to speak, this story is for you. Stay with us. And if you are watching this video, leave a comment and tell me what city you are watching from. And if you have not subscribed to the channel yet, hit that subscribe button and follow me to the very end of this story. Atlanta had a way of making rain look expensive when it fell on the right side of Peachtree Street. It slid down the glass towers like melted silver, gathered in the gutters beneath valet signs, and turned the headlights of passing cars into long golden wounds across the wet pavement. Just before midnight, the storm had emptied most of downtown, leaving only taxis, hotel shuttles, and the lonely glow of luxury lobbies standing against the dark. The Whitaker Grand on Peachtree rose at the corner like a palace that had learned American manners. Its entrance was framed by tall glass doors, polished brass handles, and 2 stone planters filled with white winter flowers. Inside, warm light spilled across Italian marble, soft jazz floated from the lounge, and everything smelled faintly of cedar, raincoats, and expensive perfume. It was the kind of hotel built to make weary travelers feel rescued the moment they stepped in. That was what Naomi Whitaker's mother had always wanted it to be. But Naomi was not entering it tonight as Eleanor Whitaker's daughter. She came through the revolving doors looking like a young black woman who had run out of places to go. Naomi was 27, tall but not imposing, with deep brown skin, rain-darkened braids tucked beneath the hood of an old army green coat, and tired eyes that noticed more than they revealed. Her jeans were faded at the knees. Her sneakers were muddy from the alley behind the MARTA station. She wore no jewelry except a thin silver cross on a chain, the only thing she had refused to take off for the night's disguise. There was a softness in her face that made strangers underestimate her, and a steadiness in her posture that made careful people think twice. Beside her limped a German shepherd named Justice. Justice was 6 years old, black and tan with a strong chest, intelligent amber eyes, and one ear that stood proudly while the other folded slightly at the tip, giving him the look of a warrior who had survived a joke made by heaven. A pale scar ran along his left rib, hidden unless the light caught his coat just right. He had once been found behind an abandoned roadside motel outside Macon, chained to a rusted fence with no food and a bowl full of rainwater. Naomi had been volunteering with her mother's animal outreach program that day. She remembered how he had not barked when they approached. He had simply watched her with exhausted dignity, as if he had already decided humans could be terrible, but might still occasionally surprise him. Naomi had named him Justice because her mother once told her that justice was not anger with a crown on its head. It was love that refused to look away. Tonight, Justice's right front paw was wrapped badly in a strip of gray cloth, and blood had begun to soak through it. He had stepped on broken glass 2 blocks away when a delivery truck splashed through a puddle and startled him. Naomi had knelt under a bus shelter, pressed her scarf around the wound, and whispered apologies into his wet fur while he trembled against her knee. She could have ended the test right there. She could have called the private driver waiting 3 blocks away. She could have phoned David Langford, the CEO, or her mother, or anyone with enough authority to part the sea of cruelty before it reached her. But the complaints had been too many. A grandmother from Decatur turned away at 1 a.m. because she looked unstable. A young mother from College Park told there were no rooms, then watched a business traveler receive one. A disabled veteran with a service dog asked to wait outside because his clothes made guests uncomfortable. All of them had written to Whitaker Hotels. All of them had been answered with polite apologies and no proof. Naomi had come for proof. She crossed the marble floor slowly, one hand holding Justice's leash, the other tucked into her coat pocket around her phone. Small drops of water fell from her sleeves. Justice's nails clicked unevenly against the floor. Every few steps, his injured paw left a faint red mark on the white marble. So small it might have been missed by anyone who did not want to see it. Behind the front desk stood Trent Waller. Trent was 29, white, clean-shaven, and narrow-faced, with blonde hair combed so precisely it looked almost laminated. His Navy hotel uniform fit him perfectly. His name tag sat straight, and his smile, when he chose to use it, appeared quickly and vanished just as fast. He was the kind of man who believed manners and kindness were the same thing because no one had ever made him survive on only one of them. To guests in tailored coats, he sounded warm. To delivery drivers, night cleaners, and people who looked like they carried trouble in plastic bags, his voice became smooth, flat, and final. He looked up when Naomi approached. His eyes moved over her coat first, then her muddy sneakers, then the dog. They paused on the blood seeping through Justice's makeshift bandage. His mouth tightened, not with concern, but with the inconvenience of having concern expected of him. "Good evening," Naomi said. Her voice was quiet, a little hoarse from the cold. "I need a room for one night. The cheapest one you have. And maybe a towel, if possible. My dog's hurt." Justice lowered his head, as if embarrassed by the attention. Naomi rested her fingertips between his ears. Trent did not ask if the dog was all right. He did not ask whether Naomi needed medical help, or whether she had a reservation, or whether the animal was a service dog. His eyes flicked toward the lounge, where 2 guests in business suits were looking over cocktail menus, then back to Naomi. "I'm sorry, miss," he said. He was not sorry. Naomi could hear it in the empty place where compassion should have been. "We're fully booked tonight." Naomi glanced past him. The reservation screen glowed on the desk, angled just enough for her to catch the color-coded room grid. She had grown up around hotel systems. Green meant available, blue meant occupied, red meant out of service. There was enough green on that screen to shelter a small village. She looked back at Trent. "Nothing at all?" she asked. "It doesn't have to be nice. I just need somewhere dry for a few hours. I can pay." She pulled a folded stack of bills from her coat pocket. Not much. $27 in small notes, chosen deliberately. Enough to appear desperate. Not enough to appear impossible. Trent looked at the money as though she had placed a dead bird on the counter. "As I said," he replied, leaning forward slightly, lowering his voice just enough to make it public without making it loud. "The hotel is fully booked." Near the concierge desk, a young woman named Maya Torres looked up from a binder she had been pretending to organize. Maya was 24, petite, with dark hair pulled into a neat bun and warm brown eyes that revealed every feeling she had been trained to hide. She was new enough to still believe hotel work meant helping people, but experienced enough to know that helping the wrong person at the wrong time could cost her a paycheck. Her gaze moved from Naomi to Justice's bleeding paw, and something in her face tightened. Naomi saw her. Trent saw Naomi see her. "Would you like me to recommend a shelter?" he asked. "There may be places better suited for your situation." Your situation. The words settled between them like a locked door. Justice gave a soft whine. Naomi crouched beside him, checking the bandage. His body leaned into her, heavy with trust, and for 1 second, the test became something more painful than she had expected. It was one thing to let strangers judge her. It was another to watch them look past a wounded animal because the wrong person held the leash. "You're okay," she whispered to Justice. "I've got you." Trent sighed quietly, the kind of sigh meant to sound patient in case anyone important was listening. "Miss, you can't stay in the lobby with the dog bleeding on the floor." Naomi rose slowly. "I'm not trying to stay in the lobby," she said. "I'm trying to get a room." Before Trent could answer, the revolving doors turned behind her. A couple stepped in beneath a black designer umbrella. The man was in his early 50s, tall and broad-shouldered, with silver at his temples and a camel-colored overcoat that looked freshly brushed by someone else's hands. His wife was slender, white, and elegant, with smooth blonde hair, pearl earrings, and the calm expression of a woman who had never had to wonder whether a room would open for her. They moved into the lobby with the easy confidence of people who expected the world to recognize them before they introduced themselves. Trent's posture changed before they even reached the desk. His shoulders lifted. His smile arrived warm and bright, like a lamp being switched on. "Good evening," he said, stepping slightly away from Naomi as though she had become part of the weather. "Welcome to the Whitaker Grand. How may I assist you tonight?" The man shook rain from the umbrella and gave a polite laugh. "Long night. We don't have a reservation, but we were hoping you might have something available." Naomi stood beside Justice, rainwater dripping from her sleeves, blood darkening the cloth around his paw. Trent's fingers moved across the keyboard. "Of course, sir," he said. "Let me see what we can do." And for the first time that night, Naomi Whitaker did not need anyone to tell her the truth. She watched the green rooms on the screen become real for someone else. Trent Waller's fingers moved over the keyboard with the speed of a man who had suddenly remembered how to do his job. Naomi stood less than 6 feet away from him, close enough to see the green blocks of available rooms still glowing on the screen, close enough to hear the soft click of each key as he searched for a room for people who had asked for the same thing she had asked for. Justice leaned against her left leg, his injured paw lifted slightly from the marble, his body trembling not from fear but from exhaustion. The blood on his bandage had darkened to a dull rust color, and when he breathed, his sides moved with the slow patience of an animal trying very hard not to complain. The couple at the counter did not notice him at first. The man, Charles Harlan, looked to be in his early 50s, tall, silver-haired, and confident in the quiet way wealthy men often were when they had never had to raise their voices to be heard. His camel overcoat was dry except for the shoulders, and his leather gloves looked soft enough to have never touched anything rougher than a steering wheel. Beside him stood his wife, Whitney Harlan, a slender white woman in her late 40s with pearl earrings, pale blonde hair swept into a smooth twist, and the kind of delicate smile that seemed trained in mirrors. She carried herself beautifully, but there was something brittle beneath it, as if comfort had made her polished rather than kind. "We really appreciate it," Charles said, resting one hand on the counter. "Our driver got turned around near Midtown, and my wife has an early charity breakfast in the morning." "Of course, Mr. Harlan," Trent said warmly. though Charles had not given his name until 2 seconds earlier. "We'll do everything we can." Naomi lowered her eyes for a moment, not because she was ashamed, but because anger sometimes rose more cleanly when it was not fed. She had learned that from her mother. Eleanor Whitaker could sit through a room full of men underestimating her and never move except to write down exactly what they had said. Later, those same men would discover that silence had not been surrender. It had been record-keeping. So Naomi recorded. She noted the time on the brass clock behind the desk. 11:52 p.m. She noted Trent's tone, warmer by several degrees, almost musical now. She noted how his shoulders relaxed when speaking to the Harlans and tightened whenever his eyes flicked back toward her. She noted the room type he selected. Deluxe king, city view, high floor. Not the cheapest room. Not the last room. A good room offered easily, as if it had been waiting all night for the right kind of guest. Justice gave another quiet whine. This time Whitney turned and noticed him. "Oh," she said, her smile shrinking. "There's a dog." Naomi looked at her. "He's hurt." Whitney's eyes dropped to the bandage. For one brief second, something human passed across her face. Not warmth exactly, but recognition. Then she glanced at Naomi's torn coat, the wet braids beneath her hood, the muddy sneakers, and the recognition disappeared beneath discomfort. Charles looked over his shoulder too. He gave Naomi a polite nod, the kind a person gives when he wants to acknowledge someone without becoming involved in whatever is happening to them. "Rough night out there," he said. "Yes," Naomi replied. "It is." The answer was simple, but it made Charles look away. Near the concierge desk, Maya Torres had stopped pretending to work. Maya was 24, short and neat in her navy blazer, with warm brown skin, dark eyes, and a face too honest for a place that rewarded careful masks. Her parents had run a small laundromat in East Point for 30 years, and Maya had grown up watching her mother smile at rude customers because rent was due whether dignity survived the day or not. She had taken the hotel job because she loved the idea of welcoming travelers, of being the first calm voice people heard when they arrived, tired and lost. Lately, under Richard Hale's management, that dream had become smaller. More rules, more warnings, more quiet punishments for employees who helped the wrong guests too much. She saw the blood on the marble. She saw Naomi watching the screen. She saw Trent handing kindness to one guest while withholding it from another. And still, her feet did not move. That was the shame of it. It sat in her throat like a stone. "Here we are," Trent said brightly. He slid 2 key cards into a black paper sleeve embossed with the hotel's gold crest. "Room 1814, one of our best city views. The elevators are just past the lounge on your right. Breakfast begins at 6:30, and if there's anything at all you need, please don't hesitate to call." Whitney accepted the sleeve as though receiving a small gift. "You're a lifesaver." Trent smiled. "My pleasure." Naomi looked at the key cards. Justice looked at them too, not understanding their meaning, only that his person had gone very still. The couple stepped away from the counter. As they passed, Whitney drew her coat a little closer around herself, though Naomi had not moved toward her. Charles avoided Naomi's eyes this time. He was not cruel in the open, dramatic way stories often like to make people cruel. He was worse in a quieter fashion. He could see enough to know something was wrong, and not enough of himself wanted the inconvenience of saying so. Naomi waited until the elevator doors closed behind them. Then she turned back to Trent. "I'd like to speak with the manager on duty." Trent's smile did not vanish all at once. It retreated by inches. "Miss, as I explained, we don't have availability for you tonight." "You had availability for them. They were accommodated under different circumstances." Naomi tilted her head slightly. What circumstances? Trent's jaw shifted. For the first time, his smoothness cracked just enough to show the smaller, nervous man underneath. I don't think this conversation is productive. It became productive when you found a room 3 minutes after telling me there were none. The lounge had grown quieter. At a nearby table, a middle-aged black man in a gray business suit lowered his newspaper. He had kind eyes and tired shoulders, perhaps a consultant or a lawyer coming off a late flight, and he watched with the stillness of someone who recognized the old shape of a new insult. Behind the bar, a young bartender with red hair polished the same glass twice, his eyes moving carefully between Trent and Naomi. Trent noticed the attention. His cheeks colored faintly. Please wait here, he said, picking up the phone. I'll call the night manager. Thank you, Naomi said. The politeness seemed to irritate him more than anger would have. He turned slightly away and lowered his voice into the receiver, but Naomi caught enough. Richard? Front desk. I have a situation in the lobby. A woman with a dog. No reservation. She's refusing alternatives. Yes. Yes, that kind of situation. That kind. Naomi looked down at Justice. His amber eyes had grown heavy, but when her fingers brushed his head, his tail moved once against the floor. Even wounded, even cold, he was trying to comfort her. That nearly broke the careful wall she had built inside herself. She remembered the day she found him behind that motel, how he had pressed his scarred body into her lap after the chain was cut. Not because he trusted the world, but because he had chosen one person to begin again with. Tonight, she had brought him into a test meant for humans, and humans were failing in front of him. I'm sorry, boy, she whispered. Justice gave a soft breath through his nose as if to say he had already forgiven her. Maya finally moved, not far, just 3 steps from the concierge desk, enough to reach a linen drawer near the side cabinet. She pulled out a clean white towel, folded it once, then stopped. Trent's eyes snapped toward her. Maya, he said sharply. She froze. It's for the floor, she said quickly, her voice small but not empty. There's blood on the marble. For a second, Naomi saw the whole battlefield inside that sentence. Maya had found the only safe excuse kindness could wear. Trent looked at the towel, then at Naomi, then back toward the elevators. Fine, he said. Maya walked over and knelt, placing the towel gently beneath Justice's paw. She was close enough for Naomi to see that her hands were shaking. Thank you, Naomi said quietly. Maya did not look up right away. I'm sorry, she whispered, so softly it barely had a sound. Before Naomi could answer, the elevator chimed. The doors opened with a polished sigh, and Richard Hale stepped into the lobby. Richard was 46, white, broad through the shoulders, and dressed in a charcoal suit so crisp it looked like armor. His dark hair was graying at the temples, combed back with severe precision. Everything about him suggested control. The straight tie, the polished shoes, the tight mouth, the eyes that measured people as problems or assets before they became human. Employees feared him because he never shouted. He simply remembered mistakes and used them later. Guests admired him when they were rich enough to receive his charm. To everyone else, he offered procedure instead of mercy. He walked toward the desk without hurry, already wearing the expression of a man arriving at a conclusion rather than a conversation. Trent straightened at once. Maya stepped back from Justice, clutching the edge of the towel as if she had been caught stealing. Richard's eyes moved over the scene. Naomi's torn coat, the wet floor, the wounded dog, the guests watching from the lounge, Trent's stiff posture, Maya's guilty face. He did not ask what had happened. He did not ask whether the dog needed help. He did not ask why a woman who had supposedly been offered alternatives still stood in front of him with rainwater dripping from her sleeves. He stopped beside Trent and gave Naomi a professional smile with no kindness behind it. "Miss," he said, before she had spoken a single word to him, "we can't help you here." Richard Hale's smile stayed on his face like something placed there by policy, not feeling. He stood beside Trent Waller beneath the warm lights of the front desk, his charcoal suit dry and perfect, his silver-striped tie centered, his polished shoes untouched by the rain that had followed Naomi Whitaker through the revolving doors. To anyone watching from across the lobby, he might have looked calm, even professional. But up close, Naomi could see the truth in his eyes. Richard had already decided the shape of the story before asking a single question. In his version, she was not a guest. She was an inconvenience wearing a torn coat. "Miss," Richard repeated, his voice lowered to that careful hotel tone meant to sound kind while closing every door. "We can't help you here." Naomi kept one hand on Justice's leash and the other near the damp pocket of her coat, where her phone rested against her palm. Justice stood close enough that his shoulder brushed her leg. The towel Maya had placed under his paw was already stained red at the center. His breathing was quiet but uneven, and every few seconds he shifted his weight away from the injured foot. Even then, he did not pull away from Naomi. He stayed beside her, as if he understood that this golden room, with its chandeliers and velvet chairs, was somehow more dangerous than the rain outside. "I haven't explained what I need yet," Naomi said. Richard tilted his head slightly, like a patient school principal humoring a child. "My front desk associate has explained that we have no availability tonight." "That is not true," Naomi said. A small silence fell around the counter. Trent's eyes moved quickly toward Richard, then down to the keyboard. Maya Torres remained near the concierge desk, her hands clasped in front of her navy blazer, her face tight with worry. The businessman in the gray suit had folded his newspaper now. At the bar, the red-haired bartender had stopped polishing glasses completely. Richard's smile did not move. "I understand you may be frustrated." "I'm not frustrated," Naomi said. "I'm asking why I was told the hotel was fully booked, and 3 minutes later 2 walk-in guests without a reservation were given a room. They were accommodated under circumstances that do not apply here." "What circumstances?" Richard's gaze dropped briefly to Justice. "For one, you have an injured animal bleeding in the lobby." Naomi looked down at Justice, then back at Richard. "This is a pet-friendly hotel." Richard gave a soft breath through his nose, almost a laugh, but too controlled to be called one. "Pet-friendly does not mean we allow unsafe conditions in public areas. There are health standards, guest comfort standards, liability concerns." Justice lifted his head at the sound of Richard's voice. His amber eyes watched the manager with the tired patience of an old soul. A drop of water slid from the fur beneath his jaw and fell onto the marble. "He stepped on glass 2 blocks away," Naomi said. "I asked for the cheapest room so I could get him dry and bandage his paw properly. I did not ask to sleep in the lobby." Richard folded his hands in front of him. "And as we've said, there are no rooms available." Naomi looked past him at the reservation screen. Trent shifted his body subtly, blocking more of it. The movement was small, almost invisible, but not to Naomi. She had spent years learning how lies hid inside gestures. Her mother had taught her that too. People could train their mouths, Eleanor Whitaker used to say, but their bodies often confessed early. "Then I'd like to use the second door protocol," Naomi said. Something changed in Richard's face. Not enough for the guests to notice, but enough for Naomi. A tightening near the eyes, a flicker of irritation under the polished surface. Trent looked up sharply. Maya's lips parted. "The what?" Richard asked, though Naomi knew he had heard her clearly. "The second door program," Naomi said. "Whitaker Hotels offers emergency overnight assistance for travelers in crisis when weather, medical risk, or safety concerns are involved. The sign used to be by the concierge desk. Maya's eyes moved involuntarily toward the wall beside her station. Months ago, there had been a small brass plaque there. Discreet, but real, second door. Emergency guest care assistance available upon request. Under Richard's management, the plaque had disappeared during a branding refresh. Maya remembered watching maintenance remove it. Richard had called it clutter. "I'm not familiar with any such program being active at this property," Richard said. Naomi let the lie stand for a beat. "You're the night manager and you're not familiar with an emergency guest care policy?" Richard's smile finally thinned. "Miss, I'm not going to debate internal hotel operations with someone who is not a registered guest." "You won't let me register. We have no rooms. You just gave one away." Richard turned slightly, not toward Naomi, but toward the room, as if suddenly aware that the audience mattered. His tone softened again, but the softness had sharpened edges. "I understand this is difficult, truly. But this is a private business, and we cannot become a shelter every time someone walks in from the street." The words landed harder than he seemed to expect. The businessman in the gray suit looked down at his folded newspaper. The bartender's jaw tightened. Maya stared at the floor. Even Trent did not smile. Naomi stood very still. From the street. That was how Richard had decided to name her. Not as a woman. Not as a potential guest. Not as someone with money in her pocket and a wounded dog at her side. From the street. The phrase was a broom in his mouth, sweeping her away before she could leave a mark. "I walked in through the front door," Naomi said quietly. Richard's eyes narrowed. "I think we both understand what I meant." "Yes," Naomi replied. "I think we do." For the first time, Richard seemed to dislike how calm she was. Anger would have helped him. Tears would have helped him more. Either could be used as proof that she was unstable, dramatic, disruptive. But Naomi gave him neither. She only watched him, and being watched without fear made him restless. He glanced toward the far end of the lobby and lifted 2 fingers. A security guard stepped from near the hallway leading to the service elevators. He was an older black man in his early 60s, broad-shouldered but slightly stooped, with close-cropped gray hair, deep-set eyes, and a navy security jacket stretched across a body that had once been stronger than age now allowed. His name tag read Otis Grant. There was a limp in his right knee, the kind earned over years rather than days. His face was stern at first glance, but not hard. It was the face of a man who had seen trouble wear many costumes and had learned not to trust the loudest person in a room. Otis approached slowly. His eyes went first to Richard, then to Naomi, then down to Justice's bleeding paw. The sternness in his face weakened. "This is Otis Grant, our night security officer," Richard said. "He will assist if necessary." Naomi looked at Otis. "Is it necessary?" Otis did not answer right away. His gaze lingered on Justice. "That dog needs a vet," he said, his voice low and gravelly. "He needs a clean room and a bandage," Naomi said. "A vet after that." Richard cut in. "Mr. Grant, please remain available." Otis's jaw worked once, but he nodded. He was a man with bills. That fact hung around him as clearly as a second uniform. Naomi turned back to Richard. "I would like you to write down the reason you are refusing me a room." Richard blinked. "Excuse me?" "Write it down," Naomi said. "Your full name, your title, the time, the fact that I requested the cheapest available room, and that you refused because you claim there are no rooms. Also include that I requested the second door protocol, and you said it does not exist at this property." Trent went pale enough that the lobby lights seemed to find him. Richard's smile disappeared. Maya lifted her eyes. For a moment, No one spoke. Rain tapped the glass doors behind Naomi. Somewhere near the lounge, the jazz piano continued playing as if nothing sacred was being quietly murdered at the front desk. "I will not be providing a written statement," Richard said. "Why not?" "Because there is no need." "There is if everything you're saying is true." The sentence struck cleanly. Richard's face hardened, not into rage but into something colder. A man like him would never throw a chair or shout in a lobby. He did not need to. His power lived in procedures, in quiet warnings, in the ability to make other people disappear while still sounding reasonable. "You are creating a disturbance," he said. Naomi looked around the lobby. "I'm standing here. You are refusing to leave after being informed we cannot accommodate you. I asked you to document why. I have given you the answer." "You have given me several answers," Naomi said. "No rooms, pet policy, health standards, no second door program, private business, from the street. Which one would you like to write down?" Otis looked away, but not before Naomi saw the pain cross his face. Maya pressed one hand against the edge of the concierge desk as though steadying herself. Trent swallowed. Richard took one step closer. His voice dropped, smooth as black ice. "Miss, I have been more than patient. You and your dog need to leave this property now." Justice, sensing the change, rose fully on trembling legs. The towel slipped from beneath his paw. Blood touched the marble again. He did not growl. He did not bark. He simply stood between Naomi and Richard, with his injured foot held slightly off the ground, a wounded guardian in a palace that had forgotten mercy. Naomi felt her throat tighten. Not from fear, from love. Justice had been chained once, starved once, left once. And still, when he saw a person step toward her with threat hidden behind manners, he offered the only thing he had left: himself. "Mr. Hale," Naomi said, her voice quieter now, "are you officially ordering me out into a storm with an injured animal after refusing to provide an available room or emergency assistance?" Richard looked at her, and something in his expression said he understood the danger of the question. But pride, once seated on a throne, rarely steps down gracefully. He turned to Otis. "Escort her and the dog outside," Richard said. "Now." Otis Grant did not move right away. Richard Hale had given the order clearly enough for everyone in the lobby to hear, but the old security guard stood as if the words had struck something tender in him. His broad hands hung at his sides. His gray brows drew together. He looked at Naomi Whitaker, then at Justice, then at the rain throwing itself against the glass doors like handfuls of broken beads. For a man paid to obey, hesitation could be dangerous. But for a man with a conscience, obedience could be worse. "Mr. Grant," Richard said, his voice low and sharp, "please do your job." Otis swallowed. He was not a cruel man. Naomi could see that now. He had the tired dignity of someone who had spent a lifetime standing between other people and trouble, only to discover that trouble sometimes wore a manager's suit. His right knee bent stiffly as he stepped forward. "Ma'am," he said quietly, not meeting Richard's eyes, "I don't want to put hands on you. Please don't make this harder than it has to be." Naomi held the leash loosely. Her face stayed calm, but inside her, something hurt in a clean, private way. It was not fear. Fear had heat. This was colder. This was the old knowledge that injustice did not always arrive screaming. Sometimes it arrived in polished shoes, signed its name on a policy form, and asked a decent man to carry it out. Justice felt the shift before anyone else did. The German shepherd had been standing half in front of Naomi, trembling on 3 legs, his wounded paw lifted from the marble. His ears had been low, his eyes heavy with pain. Then, all at once, his body changed. His head rose. His one perfectly upright ear snapped forward, and the folded tip of the other twitched, as if catching a sound no human could hear. His nostrils widened. The tremble in his body did not stop, but it became something different. Not weakness. Recognition. "Justice?" Naomi whispered. The elevator chimed. It was a small sound, soft and ordinary, the kind that had happened all night without anyone noticing. But this time it seemed to cut through the lobby. Even the jazz from the lounge felt suddenly distant. The elevator doors opened at the far wall, spilling a clean rectangle of light onto the carpet. A man stepped out. He was in his late 50s, tall, silver-haired, and dressed in a dark navy suit that looked expensive but not flashy. His shoulders were broad, though slightly rounded from years spent carrying responsibility rather than luggage. His face was lined around the eyes, not with weakness, but with the wear of someone who had made too many difficult decisions and remembered the cost of each one. He had a calm, deliberate way of moving, and the two hotel employees walking behind him stayed a respectful step back without needing to be told. Naomi knew him at once. David Langford. To most of the hotel staff, David was the CEO of Whitaker Hotels, the man who appeared in company videos speaking about dignity, service, and what he called the moral architecture of hospitality. He had been Eleanor Whitaker's closest executive for nearly 15 years, a widower with a quiet voice and a reputation for remembering the names of housekeepers, valet attendants, and night clerks long after other executives forgot whole departments existed. He was not soft. People who mistook kindness for weakness did not last long around him. But he believed leadership was not a throne. It was a debt. To Justice, he was something simpler, a friend. The dog made a sound Naomi had not heard from him in years. It was not a bark. It was not a whine. It was a broken, joyful cry that rose out of him like a memory being pulled from deep water. Before Naomi could tighten the leash, Justice surged forward. "Justice, wait!" He did not wait. Pain should have stopped him. The blood in his bandage should have stopped him. The polished floor, the crowd, the sharp command in Richard's voice should have stopped him. But love, when it recognizes an old hand in a cruel room, does not ask permission. Justice limped hard across the marble, nearly stumbling, dragging Naomi 2 steps before she released enough leash to keep from pulling him down. Otis moved instinctively, then froze when he realized the dog was not lunging at him or Richard. Justice was running toward the elevator. The lobby changed shape around him. Trent stepped back from the desk, pale and startled. Maya lifted both hands to her mouth. The businessman in the gray suit rose halfway from his chair. A woman near the lounge whispered, "Oh my God," under her breath. Richard's face tightened in alarm, but there was confusion there too, because the animal he had treated as a problem was suddenly moving with purpose toward a man no one in that building ignored. David Langford stopped. For one impossible second, he simply stared at the German shepherd coming toward him, his professional expression falling away. Then his eyes widened, and something almost boyish broke through the tired authority of his face. "Justice." The dog reached him and pressed his head into David's hand with such force that David had to brace himself. Justice's tail thumped once, then again, slow but wild with relief. He pushed his scarred shoulder against David's leg, whining, trembling, trying to lick the man's fingers while keeping weight off his injured paw. David crouched without caring that his suit trousers touched the damp floor. "Hey, old soldier," David murmured, his voice roughened by surprise. "What happened to you?" The words moved through Naomi like a door opening into the past. 3 years earlier, before Justice had become hers, David had been at the roadside motel outside Macon with the Whitaker outreach team. Naomi remembered the late summer heat, the rusted fence, the smell of dust and old gasoline. She remembered Justice lying beneath a broken awning, too weak to stand, chained so tightly that the metal had rubbed a raw circle into his neck. Naomi had gone to pieces quietly. David had not. He had taken off his suit jacket, wrapped it around the dog's shaking body, and stayed on the ground beside him until the rescue van arrived. Justice had leaned into David that day before he trusted anyone else. Later, David had told Naomi, "Some creatures remember the first hand that did not hurt them." Justice had remembered. Now the same dog, bleeding and rain-soaked, was nuzzling that same hand in the middle of the Whitaker Grand lobby, while the people who had wanted him thrown into the storm watched in silence. David's eyes moved to the bandage. His expression darkened. "He's bleeding." Naomi had reached them by then, careful not to pull the leash. "He stepped on glass." David looked up at the sound of her voice. At first, he saw only what everyone else had seen: the torn coat, the soaked hood, the muddy sneakers, the young black woman standing under the chandelier, like someone the room had decided to reject. Then his eyes narrowed, not with suspicion, but focus. He looked at her face beneath the shadow of the hood, at the silver cross at her throat, at the eyes he had known since they were younger and fiercer and full of questions in Eleanor Whitaker's office. The color slowly changed in his face. Behind Naomi, Richard cleared his throat. "Mr. Langford, I apologize for the disruption. We were just handling—" David did not look at him. Trent's mouth opened, then closed. Maya stood frozen near the concierge desk, hope and terror fighting across her face. Otis took one slow step back, as if he had suddenly realized he had been standing on the wrong side of a locked door when the owner of the key arrived. David remained crouched beside Justice, one hand resting gently on the dog's neck. Justice pressed closer to him, his amber eyes half closed now, as if this one familiar presence had made the pain bearable. "Naomi?" David said softly. No one breathed. Naomi did not answer at first. Rainwater dripped from the edge of her hood. A red print from Justice's paw marked the marble between them. Richard's expression began to shift, but he did not yet understand enough to be afraid. David stood slowly. He looked at Naomi again, this time with full recognition, and the authority in his face cracked open into shock. "Miss Whitaker?" For a moment after David Langford said the words, the Grand Meridian forgot how to breathe. "Miss Whitaker." Two simple words, spoken not loudly, not theatrically, but with enough recognition to turn the golden lobby into a church after thunder. The guests by the lounge stopped pretending to look away. Trent Waller's hand remained frozen above the keyboard. Maya Torres stood with one hand pressed against her mouth. Otis Grant slowly lowered his eyes, as if he had just watched a match strike near dry grass and knew the fire had only begun. Naomi did not answer immediately. She looked down at Justice first. The German shepherd had settled beside David's polished shoe, his wounded paw lifted, his black and tan coat still wet from the storm. His tail moved once against the marble, weak but satisfied, as though he had done his duty by bringing the truth to the right man. Naomi touched the top of his head gently. There was no triumph in her face. If anything, she looked tired in a way that made the room feel smaller. David straightened fully. His dark navy suit was creased slightly now where he had knelt for Justice, but he seemed not to notice. At 58, David Langford carried himself with the quiet force of a man who had earned authority without needing to decorate it. His silver hair was brushed back, his blue eyes sharp behind thin-framed glasses, and the lines at the corners of his mouth suggested years of smiling only when he meant it. He looked once at Naomi's torn coat, once at Justice's bloody paw, then slowly turned toward Richard Hale and Trent Waller. Richard recovered first, or thought he did. "Mr. Langford," he said, stepping forward with the smooth urgency of a man trying to catch a vase after it had already shattered. "I apologize. This situation was not explained properly to me. We were simply managing a guest disturbance." Naomi's eyes lifted. David did not look away from Richard. "A guest disturbance." Richard's face tightened around the phrase. "A woman entered without a reservation, with an injured animal, and refused several reasonable alternatives. We were attempting to handle the matter discreetly." Trent nodded too quickly. "Yes, sir. That's exactly what happened." It was the speed of Trent's agreement that made it ugly. There was no sorrow in it, no reflection, only survival dressed as loyalty. He was pale now. The confident warmth he had shown the Harlans drained from his face. Under the lobby lights, his neatly combed blonde hair and perfect uniform made him look less professional than exposed, like a mannequin suddenly accused of having a soul. David finally turned to him. "You gave a room to Mr. and Mrs. Harlan less than 10 minutes ago." Trent swallowed. "Yes, sir. But there were circumstances." "There seem to be many circumstances tonight," David said. "They multiply whenever someone asks for the truth." A murmur passed through the lobby. Richard heard it and grew stiffer. "Mr. Langford, with respect, this is a misunderstanding. We had no way of knowing who she was." That sentence did what no accusation could have done. It revealed the entire machinery of the night. Naomi closed her eyes for half a second. David's expression changed, not into anger, but into something deeper and more dangerous. Disappointment, the kind that made shouting unnecessary. "No," David said quietly. "You had no way of knowing who you should respect." The silence after that was absolute. Then David turned toward the room. He did not raise his voice, yet every person heard him. "This is Naomi Whitaker. She is the daughter of Eleanor Whitaker, founder and principal owner of Whitaker Hotels. Her mother built this company from one roadside property outside Asheville into 23 hotels across the Southeast. And this hotel, the Whitaker Grand on Peachtree, exists because Eleanor Whitaker believed hospitality meant dignity before status, before wealth, before appearance." The words seemed to strike the marble and rise again. Maya's knees nearly softened. Otis removed his cap slowly, not because anyone told him to, but because something in him recognized the moment as solemn. Behind the bar, the young red-haired bartender looked down at the glass in his hand, like he no longer trusted what he had been willing to ignore. Richard's mouth opened. "Miss Whitaker, Naomi raised one hand slightly, not sharply, not cruelly, just enough. "Please don't apologize yet," she said. "Not before you understand what you're apologizing for." Her voice remained calm, and that calm frightened Richard more than anger would have. Naomi stepped closer to Justice, keeping him within reach, and looked around the lobby. She saw phones angled low now, not openly filming, but ready. She saw curious guests, uncomfortable staff, people who had been given the privilege of witnessing harm from a safe distance. She did not shame them. She knew silence had many parents: fear, confusion, self-preservation, habit. But she also knew silence always left the wounded standing alone. "I came here tonight because of letters," Naomi said. "Not one letter, not two. Dozens. Guests who said they were turned away at night even when rooms were available. A grandmother who had missed the last train. A father with a service dog. A housekeeper from another property whose car broke down after a double shift. A young mother who said she was told the lobby was for guests only, while her child cried in the cold." Maya's eyes filled. Naomi continued. "Most of them wouldn't attach their names. Some said they were embarrassed. Some said they didn't think anyone would believe them. A few said they had complained before and nothing changed. Richard glanced at David. Those claims were never substantiated. No, Naomi said. They were never investigated. The difference landed cleanly. David looked toward Maya. He had known her name from staff reports. He made a habit of knowing names. Maya Torres? Maya flinched slightly when he addressed her. She was still young enough to look almost like a student caught in a storm too large for her. Her navy blazer damp at the cuffs from when she had knelt near Justice. Her dark hair still neat, though her composure had cracked. Her parents had taught her to work hard, stay polite, and never risk a job unless God himself wrote the instruction on the wall. Tonight, it seemed, the wall had become a lobby. "Yes, sir," she whispered. "You saw what happened?" Maya looked at Richard first. That glance said everything. Fear had trained her to ask permission from the person who frightened her before telling the truth to the person who deserved it. David saw it. So did Naomi. "Maya," Naomi said gently, "you won't be punished for telling the truth." Richard's jaw tightened. No one here is preventing her from speaking. Maya's lips trembled. Then something in her, small and long-buried, stood up. "Yes," she said. Her voice broke, but it did not disappear. "I saw it. I saw Trent tell her there were no rooms. I saw the screen. There were rooms. Then Mr. and Mrs. Harlan came in without a reservation, and he gave them one." Trent whispered, "Maya." She did not look at him. Once the first stone rolled, the mountain began to move. "And it wasn't the first time," Maya said. "I've seen it before. Not always like this. Sometimes it's quieter. Someone comes in late, dressed rough or scared, or with bags, and Mr. Hale says we're full, or that they should try a motel farther out, or that the lobby can't become a waiting room. But then someone else comes in, someone who looks—" She stopped, ashamed of the word before saying it. "Acceptable?" Naomi asked softly. Maya nodded, tears sliding down her cheeks. "Yes." Richard's face darkened. "This is completely inappropriate. She is a junior employee making emotional assumptions about operational decisions." Otis Grant spoke before anyone expected him to. His voice was low, gravelly, and tired. "She ain't wrong." Every head turned toward him. Otis still held his cap in both hands. His face was plain, honest, and wounded by the cost of what he was about to say. "I've been called up front more than once for folks who didn't do anything but look poor. I told myself it wasn't my place. Told myself I got a wife at home with medical bills, and I needed to keep my head down." He looked at Naomi. "That don't make it right. Just makes me late." Naomi's expression softened. "Late is not the same as lost, Mr. Grant." Justice gave a soft breath, almost like agreement. David turned sharply toward the desk. "I want the lobby camera footage preserved immediately. I want the reservation logs for the last 6 hours, including room availability at the exact time Miss Whitaker requested accommodation. I also want the key card records for the Harlan check-in." Richard's voice went thin. "Mr. Langford, surely that level of review can wait until morning." "It cannot." David looked toward a side office near the lobby where the night auditor had appeared in the doorway. Her name was Marla Keene, a woman in her early 50s with silver-brown hair cut at her chin, square glasses, and the careful posture of someone who balanced numbers for a living and trusted them more than people. She wore a black cardigan over her uniform and had the pale, startled look of a person who had come out to see a commotion and walked into a judgment day. "Marla," David said, "pull the room status report." "Yes, Mr. Langford." He turned to a slim young man emerging behind her with a tablet in his hand. This was Ethan Price, The overnight systems technician, 31, black, soft-spoken, with close-cropped hair, round glasses, and a nervous habit of tapping his thumb against the edge of any device he carried. Ethan was the kind of employee most guests never noticed, unless the Wi-Fi failed. But the hotel's invisible memory lived in the systems he maintained. "Ethan," David said. "Security footage. Lobby camera. Start at 11:45. Ethan nodded quickly. "Yes, sir." The lobby waited. Rain struck the glass. Justice leaned against Naomi's leg again. Trent stared at the floor. Richard stood too still. Ethan's fingers moved over the tablet. At first, his face showed concentration, then confusion, then something colder. "Mr. Langford," he said. David turned. "What is it?" Ethan looked up slowly, his skin gone ashen beneath the lobby lights. "The lobby footage from the last 20 minutes is missing." David's face hardened. "Missing?" Ethan swallowed. "Not corrupted. Not a system error. Deleted." The word traveled through the lobby like a match dropped into oil. Naomi looked at Richard. Richard did not move. And in that stillness, everyone saw the next truth arrive before anyone dared speak it. The word deleted did not merely fall into the lobby. It struck the floor and split the night open. For a few seconds, nobody moved. The rain kept tapping the glass doors. The jazz from the lounge had finally stopped, as if even the hidden speakers understood that music no longer belonged in the room. Ethan Price stood near the side office with the tablet held in both hands, his round glasses catching the lobby lights, his thumb frozen against the edge of the screen. He was not a dramatic man. He fixed routers, restored frozen terminals, and explained password resets to angry guests with the patience of a church usher. But now his face had gone pale beneath his brown skin, because systems told stories, and this one had just whispered a crime. David Langford's voice was quiet. "Say that again." Ethan swallowed. "The lobby footage from 11:45 to 12:06 is gone. Not unavailable. Not buffering. Gone. The deletion log shows manual access." Richard Hale stood so still that his suit seemed carved out of stone. Trent Waller stared at the counter, as though the mahogany might open and swallow him. Naomi Whitaker watched both men without speaking. Justice leaned heavily against her leg. His wounded paw lifted, his breathing shallow but steadier now that David had wrapped another clean towel around the blood-soaked bandage. The dog's amber eyes moved from face to face, ancient and tired, as if he had seen cages, chains, and lies before, and found human cruelty disappointingly repetitive. "Who accessed it?" Naomi asked. Ethan tapped the screen with careful fingers. "That's where it gets strange. The system shows a manager-level override, but the user field was wiped. Whoever did it knew enough to remove the name, but not enough to erase the fact that someone entered through the admin panel." Marla Keene stepped closer, clutching a printed room status report against her black cardigan. Marla was a woman built from straight lines, straight chin-length silver-brown hair, square glasses, straight posture, straight answers. She had spent 22 years in hotels and trusted numbers because numbers did not flatter bosses or insult housekeepers. "That takes access," she said. "Not front desk access. Higher than that." David looked at Richard. "Who was logged in as manager tonight?" Richard's mouth tightened. "Several terminals remain active during overnight operations. It would be irresponsible to make accusations without a complete audit." "That is not what I asked." "I was logged in at the office terminal," Richard said, "as part of normal procedure." Naomi caught Trent's eyes flick upward, then down again. Small movement. Large confession. David turned to Marla. Room status. Marla handed him the report, but David did not take it. Read it aloud. Marla looked once at Richard, then adjusted her glasses. At 11:49 p.m., when Miss Whitaker requested accommodation, the property had 37 vacant clean rooms, 12 vacant inspected rooms, and 4 emergency hold rooms unassigned. A sound moved through the lobby. Not a gasp exactly, more like shame discovering it had witnesses. Naomi's face did not change, but the hand resting on Justice's neck pressed more gently into his fur. Emergency hold rooms? Marla nodded. Rooms blocked for operational discretion. Weather events, travel disruptions, medical situations, VIP overflow, staff emergencies, that kind of thing. The second door rooms, Maya Torres said softly. Richard turned on her. Maya. But Maya did not fold this time. She looked smaller than Richard, younger than Richard, easier to break than Richard, yet something in her stood straighter now. That's what they were called when I started. We were told to avoid mentioning them unless a supervisor approved it. Then the plaque came down. David's expression hardened. Who ordered that? Richard answered too quickly. Brand standards changed. The program was confusing guests. Naomi looked at him. Helping desperate people was confusing? It was being misused. By whom? Richard's jaw worked. People looking for free rooms? Justice gave a low sound then, not a growl, but close enough that Richard stepped back half an inch. Naomi touched the dog's ear. Easy, boy. David turned back to Ethan. Reservation logs, search denied walk-ins, notes, incident tags, anything connected to front desk refusals in the last 6 months. Ethan hesitated. Sir, that may take... Start with tonight. Ethan nodded and moved to the front desk terminal. Trent stepped aside as if the machine itself had become dangerous. Ethan typed quickly. The screen changed from the warm hotel interface to a colder administrative view full of timestamps, initials, and coded notes. Naomi watched the list populate. She had grown up hearing her mother say a hotel remembered everything. Who entered, who left, which doors opened, which rooms slept empty. Tonight, the building had become a witness box. Ethan read the first line. 10:18 p.m. Walk-in inquiry. Female, no luggage. Note, not suitable. Maya closed her eyes. Ethan continued. 10:43 p.m. Male guest with dog. Note, lobby risk. Referred elsewhere. 11:12 p.m. Family of 4. Cash payment request. Note, appearance concern. No booking created. 11:33 p.m. Woman with child. Requested emergency rate. Note, no availability. Naomi's head lifted. A woman with a child? Ethan scrolled. Yes, no name entered. Only initials from the staff member. Marla leaned in. T.W. Trent's face drained completely. David did not look at him yet. That was somehow worse. His patience had become a blade laid flat on a table, waiting to be lifted. Naomi stepped closer to the terminal. Go back further. Ethan scrolled, and the words became a procession of quiet cruelty. Not suitable. Lobby risk. Appearance concern. Possible panhandler. Unverified service animal. Cash only. No luggage. Too many bags. Wet clothes. Strong odor. Uncomfortable guest presence. No availability. No availability. No availability. Every phrase looked harmless enough to survive an inspection if no one cared to understand it. That was the genius of cowardly systems. They rarely wrote hatred plainly. They dressed it in soft language, placed it in drop-down menus, and taught decent people to stop hearing the human being underneath. Maya began to cry silently. She wiped her cheeks with the heel of her hand, angry at herself for the tears. "I entered some of those," she whispered. Naomi turned to her. Maya shook her head. "Not because I agreed. Because Mr. Hale said we had to document why people were redirected. He said if we wrote the notes correctly, corporate wouldn't question it. I knew it was wrong. I knew. But I told myself maybe I didn't understand the policy. Maybe I was too new. Maybe if I kept my job long enough, I could help people later." Her voice broke. Later kept moving. No one mocked her. That was the mercy of the moment. Even the guests seemed to understand that guilt can be a doorway if someone is brave enough to walk through it. Otis Grant stood near the edge of the lobby, his cap still in his hands. The old guard's broad shoulders had sunk lower, as though every entry on the screen had added weight to his back. "I got called for some of them," he said. David looked at him. "Tell me." Otis rubbed one hand over his gray hair. "My wife, Lillian, she's sick. Kidney trouble. Some months we're choosing between medicine and the gas bill. I needed this job. I kept telling myself security don't decide who gets rooms. We just respond when called." He looked toward the revolving doors. "But I saw folks standing right where she stood. Wet, tired, scared, not making trouble, just asking." His voice roughened. "A man with a little boy last month. Kid had a dinosaur backpack. Couldn't have been more than 6. Richard told me they were loitering. I walked them out. Boy asked me if the hotel was mad at them." Otis's mouth trembled once. "I should have said something then." Naomi felt the words strike a place in her heart she had tried to guard. She had come to expose policy failure, to collect proof, to show her mother that the complaints were not isolated. But policy failure had faces. It had Otis's shame, Maya's tears, Justice's blood. It had children with backpacks and mothers standing in rain while rooms slept empty above them like unused blessings. David removed his glasses and pinched the bridge of his nose. When he put them back on, his eyes had changed. "We secure every log now. Copy everything to corporate legal. Marla, print the room status and denied inquiry list. Ethan, preserve the deletion metadata. Maya, write down everything you remember while it is fresh. Mr. Grant, you too." Richard finally stepped forward. "Mr. Langford, this is becoming reckless. You are allowing emotional testimony to frame routine operational discretion. Those notes can be misinterpreted. Staff must be able to protect the property." Naomi looked at him. "From what?" Richard's nostrils flared. "From situations that disturb paying guests. I tried to pay. You had $27 for the cheapest room, for an emergency program your hotel claims to have. Our hotel is not a charity." David's voice cut in, low and deadly calm. "This hotel exists because Eleanor Whitaker was once turned away from a lobby with 2 children and nowhere to go. You know that story. Every manager knows that story." Richard's face tightened, but he said nothing. Maya suddenly looked toward the glass doors. "Wait." Everyone turned. She moved to the terminal beside Ethan and pointed at the 11:33 p.m. entry. "Woman with child, emergency rate. No name. TWI, remember this. She came in before my break. She had a little girl with her, maybe 5, and a boy asleep against her shoulder. She said their car wouldn't start, and she didn't feel safe staying outside." Naomi's body went still. "Where did she go?" David asked. Maya shook her head. "Trent told her there were no rooms. Mr. Hale was on the phone in the office, but he gave the hand signal, the one for redirect. She asked if she could sit in the lobby until the rain slowed down." Maya looked at Otis. "I think," Otis closed his eyes, "I walked them out." The room fell silent again, but this silence was different. It had become urgent. Naomi looked through the glass entrance, past the valet stand, past the rain-silvered drive, toward the darker edge of the property where the parking lot stretched beneath wet trees and yellow security lights. "She said their car wouldn't start?" Naomi asked. Maya nodded. Naomi moved before anyone could stop her. Justice tried to follow, stumbled, and David caught his leash gently. "I'll keep him here," David said. "Go." Naomi pushed through the revolving doors into the cold. Rain hit her face like thrown gravel. The parking lot smelled of wet asphalt, gasoline, and magnolia leaves crushed under tires. Behind her, David, Otis, and Maya followed, while Richard remained under the chandelier, frozen in the lobby's golden light. At the far end of the lot, beneath a flickering security lamp, Naomi saw an old blue minivan. Its windows were fogged from the inside. She ran toward it, muddy water splashing around her shoes. As she came closer, she saw the shape of a woman in the driver's seat, head tilted against the window, one arm wrapped around herself for warmth. In the back seat, under a thin blanket, two small children slept curled together like puppies trying to survive winter. The little girl had dark curls and a pink coat zipped to her chin. The boy, younger, clutched a plastic dinosaur against his chest. Naomi stopped beside the van, breath caught in her throat. On the dashboard lay a folded hotel brochure, the Whitaker Grand on Peachtree, and written across the top in Trent's neat handwriting were 3 words: "No rooms available." Naomi Whitaker stood in the rain beside the old blue minivan, staring at the words on the brochure as if they had been written across her own chest. No rooms available. The ink had blurred slightly from damp air, but the handwriting was still clear, still neat, still cruel in its simplicity. Behind her, the Whitaker Grand glowed like a promise it had broken. Inside that building were empty beds, warm towels, room service kitchens, emergency hold rooms, soft blankets folded by careful hands. Outside, in a parking lot under a flickering yellow lamp, a mother and 2 children were trying to survive the night in a cold car. David Langford reached the van first, after Naomi. He was breathing hard, not from age exactly, but from the shock of seeing the company he had served reduced to this image: fogged windows, sleeping children, and a hotel brochure used as a rejection slip. Maya Torres stopped beside him with both hands over her mouth. Otis Grant came last, his limp worse in the rain, his face carrying the pain of a man forced to recognize his own footprints at the edge of someone else's suffering. Naomi tapped gently on the driver's window. The woman inside startled awake, jerking upright and clutching at a small can of pepper spray in the cup holder before her eyes adjusted. She was in her early 30s, white, thin from stress more than nature, with brown hair pulled into a messy knot and purple shadows beneath eyes that had not slept properly in months. Her name, they would soon learn, was Hannah Reed. She had the worn-out toughness of a mother who had been scared so long she had learned to turn fear into routine. In the back seat, 5-year-old Lily Reed slept in a pink coat, with one mitten missing. Her dark curls stuck to her cheek. Her little brother, Noah, only 3, had blonde hair flattened from sleep and a plastic dinosaur pressed under his chin like a knight's shield. "It's all right," Naomi said through the glass, lifting both hands so Hannah could see she meant no harm. "We're from the hotel. We're going to get you inside." Hannah looked past her toward the shining entrance. The confusion on her face broke slowly into disbelief. "They said there weren't any rooms." "There are rooms," Naomi said. "They lied." The word sounded harsh in the rain, but it was kinder than pretending. Hannah unlocked the door with shaking fingers. When she stepped out, her knees nearly gave way. Otis moved instinctively, and caught her elbow. This time, his hands did what they should have done earlier. They helped. Hannah flinched at first, then saw his face and let him steady her. "I'm sorry," Otis said, the words rough in his throat. "I'm sorry, ma'am." Hannah did not know enough to forgive him, so she only nodded. Naomi opened the sliding door. Cold air rolled out of the van. Lily stirred and whimpered. Noah blinked awake, confused, clutching his dinosaur harder. Maya climbed in without hesitation, her blazer soaking at the shoulders as she wrapped the hotel towel around Lily's legs. "Hi, sweetheart," she said softly. "My name is Maya. We're going somewhere warm." Lily looked at her with the solemn suspicion of a child who had learned adults could make promises and break them before breakfast. "Is Mommy coming?" "Mommy's coming," Naomi said. That was all Lily needed. She reached for Naomi with both arms. Naomi lifted her gently, feeling how cold the child's hands were around her neck. Noah refused to leave the dinosaur until David solemnly asked the toy if it would like a hotel room too. The little boy nodded once, still half asleep, and allowed David to carry him. It was the first almost laugh of the night, tiny and fragile, but it flickered through the rain like a match refusing to die. They entered the lobby together. The effect was immediate. Guests who had stayed to watch the scandal now saw what the scandal had produced. Not a policy debate, not a misunderstanding. A mother with wet shoes and hollow eyes. A little girl shivering against Naomi's shoulder. A toddler half asleep in the CEO's arms. Otis walking behind them with his cap held to his chest like a confession. Maya, drenched and crying openly now, carrying the thin blanket from the van. Richard Hale was still standing near the front desk when they came in. His face changed when he saw Hannah. It was not guilt first. It was calculation. That made Naomi's anger finally rise hot enough to show. "Open a second door room," she said. Trent Waller, pale and shaking behind the desk, looked at Richard out of habit. Naomi saw it. David saw it. Eleanor Whitaker would have seen it from across a battlefield. David's voice cut through the lobby. "Do not look at him. Open the room." Marla Keene, still holding the printed reports, stepped behind the counter and took over the terminal. "Emergency hold room 304 is clean and inspected," she said. 2 queens, near the service elevator, quiet side of the building. "Assign it," David said. "No charge." Richard began. "Mr. Langford, there are billing procedures. Not tonight," David said. "No," Naomi said, turning to Richard. "Not ever, when the policy says emergency care." The key cards printed with a soft, mechanical click. Such a small sound. Such a little gate opening. Maya took them and guided Hannah toward the elevators, but Hannah paused in front of Naomi. "Why are you helping us?" she asked. Naomi looked down at Lily, whose head now rested against her shoulder. "Because someone should have helped you the first time." Before Hannah could answer, the revolving doors turned again. An older black woman entered without an umbrella, as if she had walked through the storm by will alone and expected the weather to apologize later. Eleanor Whitaker was 63, tall, elegant, and commanding in a long black coat over a cream blouse. Her silver-streaked natural hair swept back from a face that had known both hunger and boardrooms. Her skin was deep brown, her eyes sharp and sorrowful, and there was nothing ornamental about her strength. She had once cleaned bathrooms at a roadside inn outside Asheville, North Carolina, scrubbing tile until her wrists ached while guests walked past without seeing her. Years later, she bought that same failing inn with borrowed money, painted the doors blue, and built Whitaker hotels from the memory of every door that had once closed in her face. She stopped just inside the lobby, taking in everything. Naomi in the torn coat, Justice lying on a towel near David with his paw bandaged, Hannah and the children by the elevator, Maya soaked through, Otis with his head bowed, Trent shaking, Richard standing too straight. "Tell me," Eleanor said. No one mistook it for a request. David did. Briefly, clearly, without decoration. Naomi added what she had seen. Maya spoke through tears. Otis confessed again, this time to Eleanor's face. Marla read the room's status numbers. Ethan showed the deletion log. Hannah, still holding Noah now, whispered that she had only asked to sit in the lobby until the rain slowed down. Eleanor listened without interrupting. That made it worse for the guilty. Anger would have given them something to resist. Her silence made every fact walk barefoot across the lobby. When the last word ended, Eleanor looked around at the marble floor, the chandeliers, the flowers, the polished brass, the beautiful house she had built. Pain crossed her face so openly that Naomi felt younger just seeing it. "I built this place," Eleanor said at last, "because once, when Naomi was 6 years old, a hotel night manager told me my children and I would make the lobby uncomfortable. I had money for one room. Not much, but enough. He looked at my cleaning uniform and told me they were full." She touched the back of a chair, as if steadying herself against memory. "I promised God that if I ever owned a door, I would never let it be used that way." Richard's voice came small. "Mrs. Whitaker, I deeply regret." "No," Eleanor said. One word. It ended him. "You regret being seen." Richard's face emptied. Eleanor turned to David. "Effective immediately, Richard Hale is terminated. Preserve all records for legal review." David nodded. "Done." Richard opened his mouth, then closed it. There was no speech left that could rebuild him. Security did not need to drag him out. He walked toward the back office with the stiff dignity of a man carrying the ruins of his own authority in his hands. Eleanor looked at Trent next. The young clerk had tears in his eyes now, though fear had produced more of them than remorse. "You are suspended pending review," she said. "If you return, it will be after values-based retraining, community service through second door outreach, and a written acknowledgement of what you did. Skill without character is dangerous at a front desk." Trent nodded, unable to speak. Then Eleanor turned to Maya. "Miss Torres." Maya straightened as much as her trembling body allowed. "Yes, ma'am." "You were afraid." "Yes, ma'am." "But you still moved toward the wounded." Maya began to cry again. "Starting tonight," Eleanor said, "you will serve as acting guest care supervisor on overnight operations. You will report directly to David until this property is rebuilt from the inside." Maya covered her mouth. "I won't let you down." "See that you don't," Eleanor said, but her voice softened. "And see that no one makes you afraid to do right again." Hannah and her children were finally taken upstairs. Justice was carried carefully by Otis and David to a quiet corner, while a veterinary urgent care service was called. The lobby began to exhale, though it did not yet know how to become ordinary again. David approached Naomi. "I've prepared the presidential suite for you." Naomi looked toward the elevator where Hannah had disappeared. Then she looked at her mother. "No." Eleanor studied her daughter. Naomi's torn coat still dripped on the marble. Her face was tired, but her eyes were clear. "Tonight, I sleep in one of the emergency rooms," she said. "The kind this hotel was supposed to open for someone like me." For a long moment, Eleanor said nothing. Then she nodded, and in that nod was grief, pride, apology, and the beginning of repair. "Then that is where we begin," Eleanor said. 3 months later, Atlanta wore a softer rain. It was not the hard midnight storm that had beaten against the glass the night Naomi Whitaker first walked into the Whitaker Grand on Peachtree, looking like a woman the world had forgotten. This rain came in silver threads, gentle against the awnings, bright beneath the street lamps, washing Peachtree Street until the city looked almost forgiven. The hotel still rose grand and golden at the corner, with its brass doors, white flowers, and marble floors polished enough to hold reflections. But something inside had changed more deeply than any renovation could show. The lobby no longer felt like a museum of wealth. It felt like a threshold. Beside the front entrance, where there had once been empty wall space, a new brass sign caught the light. Second door guest care. Emergency overnight assistance available for travelers in crisis, families with children, guests with service animals, injured pets, weather emergencies, and safety concerns. Please ask any staff member for help. Below the sign was a small blue emblem, an open door, a hand extended, and the silhouette of a German shepherd. Justice had become part of the promise. The old dog was not old in years, only in spirit. At 6, Justice still had the strong chest and noble black and tan coat of a born guardian, though his right front paw now carried a faint scar where the glass had cut him that night. His folded ear Sambosumo still tipped slightly, making him look as if he were listening to heaven with one ear and human foolishness with the other. His rib scar remained, pale beneath his fur, a reminder of the chain that had once held him behind an abandoned motel. But his limp was gone. His eyes were brighter. These days, when he walked through the lobby beside Naomi, children pointed, staff smiled, and even tired travelers seemed to stand a little gentler. The hotel had changed because the people inside it had been forced to remember what hospitality meant. Every overnight employee had gone through new training, not the stiff kind with slides and corporate phrases, but real training built from real stories. Eleanor Whitaker had insisted on that. Staff sat in small rooms and listened to people who had been turned away from warm buildings. They heard from mothers who had slept in cars, veterans with service dogs, delivery workers stranded after breakdowns, elderly travelers lost after canceled buses. Some employees cried, some quit, some stayed and became better. The front desk no longer used coded phrases like not suitable or appearance concern. Those words had been removed from the system and replaced by questions that sounded almost too simple for a luxury hotel. Is the guest safe? Is a child involved? Is an animal injured? Is there an available room? Who can help? Maya Torres now stood at the center of that new system. At 24, Maya still looked young enough that some guests underestimated her at first. She was petite, with warm brown skin, dark hair usually pinned in a neat bun, and eyes that had learned to hold kindness without asking permission. But the fear that had once made her hands shake at the concierge desk had changed into something steadier. As acting guest care supervisor, she wore a navy blazer with a small blue second door pin above her name tag. Staff listened when she spoke, not because she had become harsh, but because she had become clear. She knew the difference between kindness and weakness now. She knew a policy was only holy if someone had the courage to use it. Otis Grant had changed too. He still worked nights, still walked with a limp in his right knee, still wore his Navy security jacket across his broad shoulders. His gray hair was close-cropped, his hands large, his voice low and gravelly. But he no longer stood as a wall between the hotel and the vulnerable. He stood as a bridge. The younger guards learned quickly that Mr. Grant noticed everything. The mother counting bills in the lobby, the teenager pretending not to be scared, the elderly man circling the entrance because he was too proud to ask for directions. Otis had started carrying granola bars in one pocket and small dog treats in the other. When anyone teased him about it, he said, "A guard ought to protect more than carpet." It became a joke among the staff, but a gentle one. Even Otis smiled when they repeated it. His wife, Lillian, had improved after the company health fund helped cover her kidney treatments. Otis never asked for charity, and Eleanor never called it charity. She called it debt repaid. Naomi returned to the hotel on a quiet Tuesday evening, not in disguise this time. She wore dark jeans, a cream sweater, and a long brown coat, her braids falling neatly over her shoulders. The silver cross still rested at her throat. She looked less like a storm arriving, and more like someone who had survived one. Justice walked beside her, proud but calm, his leash loose in her hand. At the entrance, he paused beneath the second door sign and sniffed the air with the seriousness of a priest inspecting a chapel. Naomi laughed softly. "You approve?" she asked. Justice gave one low huff. "I'll take that as a yes." Inside, the lobby glowed with evening warmth. A pianist played near the lounge, not jazz this time, but an old hymn softened into hotel music. It might have been coincidence. Naomi chose not to think so. Her mother had always said God had a habit of arriving through ordinary instruments: a stranger's hand, a dog's memory, a door that opened when someone had expected it to close. David Langford met Naomi near the front desk. At 58, he remained tall and silver-haired, wearing a dark suit and the calm expression of a man who still carried responsibility like a familiar weight. But there was less sadness in his eyes now. He bent to greet Justice first, because Justice demanded proper protocol by pressing his head against David's hand. "Old soldier," David murmured, "you're looking better than half the executives I met today." Justice wagged once, forgiving the comparison. Naomi smiled. "How is the night shift?" "Different," David said. "Still imperfect, but alive." Before Naomi could answer, the revolving doors turned. A woman stepped in, carrying a toddler on one hip and holding the leash of an old dog in the other hand. She looked to be in her early 30s, black, short, and tired, with rain beading on the shoulders of a thin denim jacket. Her name was Rachel Miller, though Naomi did not know it yet. Rachel had the careful face of someone who had learned to apologize before asking for anything. Her little boy, Caleb, was about 4, round-cheeked and sleepy, with one red sneaker untied and a toy fire truck clutched in his fist. The dog beside them was an elderly Labrador mix with a cloudy muzzle, soft brown eyes, and a stiff back leg. A faded pink collar hung loose around her neck. Rachel stopped just inside the entrance and looked around the lobby as if she had accidentally wandered into a place meant for other people. Maya saw her before Rachel reached the desk. That was the first miracle. Not grand, not loud, just a young woman looking up in time. Maya crossed the lobby with an easy smile. "Good evening. Welcome to the Whitaker Grand. My name is Maya. How can we help make tonight easier?" Rachel blinked, startled by the word help. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I know this is probably not... I don't have a reservation. My son and I were on our way to my sister's in Macon, but my car overheated 2 blocks away. My phone is almost dead. And Daisy," she looked down at the old dog, "she's been limping since we got out. I can pay something, not a lot. I just need somewhere safe until morning." The old lobby might have judged her jacket, her tired face, the old dog, the child half asleep on her shoulder. The old lobby might have asked whether she belonged. The new lobby moved. Maya crouched slightly so she could meet Caleb's eyes. "Hi, Caleb. Is that a fire truck?" Caleb tucked his chin shyly, then nodded. "That is very serious equipment," Maya said. "We'd better make sure it gets a good parking spot tonight." A tiny smile appeared on the boy's face. Otis was already beside Rachel with a warm towel for the dog. "What's her name again?" "Daisy," Rachel said. Otis knelt slowly, careful with his bad knee. "Miss Daisy, you and me both got legs that complain in the rain." He looked up at Rachel. "We have a pet first aid kit right here. Maya will get you settled." Rachel's eyes filled so quickly she looked embarrassed by them. "You're not going to ask us to leave?" Maya's face softened. "No, ma'am, you came to the right door." From across the lobby, Naomi felt something inside her loosen, not vanish. Some wounds did not disappear simply because one night ended differently, but they could be answered. Not erased, but answered. Justice leaned against her leg, watching Daisy with quiet interest. The old Labrador lifted her cloudy muzzle and wagged once, as if two veterans of human weather had recognized each other across a battlefield. Rachel was guided to the desk. Marla Keene, straight-backed and serious as ever, printed the second door paperwork in less than a minute. Ethan Price appeared from the side office with a portable phone charger. A young front desk clerk Naomi had not met. A freckled woman named Brooke Ellis with red hair and a nervous but sincere smile brought a small blanket for Caleb. Brooke was new, barely 22, and still learning the sacred weight of a front desk. She treated the blanket like a royal cloak, wrapping it around the sleepy boy with both hands. No one made Rachel prove she was worthy of warmth. No one asked Daisy to bleed more before believing she needed help. No one looked at the child and saw inconvenience. Naomi stood beside David and watched the ordinary work of mercy happen in real time. It was not dramatic enough for a headline. No one was fired. No one gasped. No hidden identity froze the room. A tired mother asked for shelter, and the hotel answered as it always should have. Eleanor Whitaker appeared quietly near the lounge, leaning on a cane she disliked using but tolerated when her knees argued with the weather. She wore a deep blue dress and a silver wrap, her hair swept back, her face proud and sad and peaceful all at once. She came to stand beside Naomi without speaking. After a moment, Naomi said, "This is what you meant it to be." Eleanor watched Maya hand Rachel the key cards with both hands, not tossed across the counter, not slid like a favor, but offered with dignity. "No," she said softly. "This is what we have to keep choosing." Rachel turned then, as if sensing she was being watched. She gave Naomi a shy, grateful smile without knowing who Naomi was. That was the beauty of it. The kindness did not depend on recognition anymore. Justice stepped forward, and Daisy sniffed his nose. Caleb laughed when Justice's folded ear twitched. The sound moved through the lobby like a candle being lit. Naomi looked around at the marble, the brass, the chandeliers, the flowers, the shining doors. Once all that beauty had hidden a failure. Now perhaps it could serve a purpose. A hotel was not made noble by its height, its chandeliers, or the price of its suites. A hotel became noble only when the person walking in with nothing but rain on their shoulders, fear in their chest, and hope barely alive in their hands, was met not with suspicion, but with shelter. That night, the Whitaker Grand finally became grand. The lesson of this story is simple, but it reaches deep into the heart. Never judge a person by the coat they wear, the shoes on their feet, or the pain they carry into the room. Sometimes the one who looks forgotten is the very person God has sent to reveal the truth. Sometimes the wounded dog at their side is not a burden, but a small miracle leading everyone back to compassion. Naomi walked into that hotel looking poor, cold, and unwanted. Justice walked beside her with blood on his paw. But God saw what others refused to see. He saw dignity beneath the torn coat. He saw courage behind the quiet voice. He saw a wounded animal still willing to love. And through that night, he opened not just one hotel door, but many human hearts. In our daily lives, we may meet people who look tired, broken, difficult, or different from us. We may never know what storm they just walked through. A kind word, a warm smile, a helping hand, or simply choosing not to look away can become the miracle they prayed for. So let this story remind us to treat every person with respect before they prove anything to us. Let us be the kind of people who open doors, not close them. Let us remember that God often hides his greatest lessons inside the people the world overlooks. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment and tell us what this story made you feel. And if you believe God can still turn cruelty into kindness, pain into purpose, and closed doors into open ones, comment Amen below. Subscribe to the channel for more stories of faith, kindness, and second chances. May God bless you, protect your family, heal your heart, and guide your steps wherever you are watching from.